It's been a while since I've done one of these, but I think I now have a good topic for a Boruto theory video. What's going on, you guys? Welcome on back to the channel. And yes, it has been a long time since I've done a Boruto theory video, probably like a month or two since I've done one, but I think I finally have found a good topic for discussion. So, as we all know, that new V Jump promotional photo came out with Boruto front and center on it. And at first glance, you don't really see too much with it. It's like, okay, it's just Boruto on the cover of V Jump. Like, we've seen it before. What difference does it make? Well, what the reason why this is so important and why it's the topic of discussion today is if you zoom in on that V Jump photo and you zoom in on Boruto and you look at his scar, you can see that his scar looks a lot different than it's always been represented as. Like in the manga, it's always been represented as just like kind of like a straight line down the middle of his eye. But on this cover photo, it looks a lot different. It looks like it's kind of like morphing in a way. And what I think this represents is I think this is one, Momoshiki trying to fight for dominance of Boruto's body, and two, this is how Jougan is going to come back. Now, let's start with Momoshiki's part first. So, why do I think that this could be the impetus for how Momoshiki comes back into the story? Well, back in Boruto Part 1, when Boruto got the scar, or before Boruto even got the scar, the only way that Momoshiki could really take over Boruto was when he used too much of his chakra and basically had no chakra left, and that's when Momoshiki could take over. Now, now that Boruto has this scar, though, Boruto now has essentially a chink in his armor that Momoshiki can utilize because throughout the story, like Boruto has had very good like mental fortitude to keep Momoshiki essentially at bay, like all through part one and especially in part two. He's had especially good mental fortitude, but now that Boruto has this chink in his armor now with the scar, he has to fight now 10 times harder to keep Momoshiki at bay. Because as we've seen, when Boruto's karma gets activated, he is now deathly afraid of it to the point where he's running away. And he's even told Kawaki now that if Momoshiki takes over, that could be it. He might not be able to come back from it because he said before the last time that when he was training his karma marking, he felt like he was dying at some point. He felt like he was dying from it. So essentially now, Momoshiki, all Momoshiki has to do is exploit Boruto, exploit his scar. Like if Boruto uses his karma, exploit his scar so that way he can take over easier because he has a chink in his armor. And essentially, that could be how Boruto dies, and it's just Momoshiki that is in control. But that might not come to pass because of the second part of the theory, which is this could be how Jougan gets reintroduced back into the story. Now, when it comes to Jougan as something that's in the story, it's interesting because it's only shown up really three times that are of note. One is during the Nue and Sumerai arc. One is when Boruto is fighting Momoshiki briefly, and another is when Boruto has to like track the fucking Otsutsuki guy in the desert. I don't remember his name. He sucked. He was filler. I don't remember him. But those are really the only three times that Jougan has been able to reawaken. But why hasn't Jougan ever shown back into the story? Why is it something that is always seemingly left to either anime canon material or just filler stuff? The reason why is because Jougan, I feel, is an ability that is somewhat sentient in which that it only activates when it knows that it's something only Boruto can do to defeat something, or if it's something that will affect fate too much. Because as we know, Jougan is known as the Star of Hope, right? It's known as the Star of Hope by um, by Toneri. Toneri told us that it's the Star of Hope. So basically, this ability can only activate either when Boruto is the only one that can do something, or we've entered a critical point in the story where essentially like things have the potential to diverge if the Jogan does not interfere or intervene. So like with in particular in the New arc, if Jogan didn't activate throughout that whole arc, everything would have like the village essentially would have been destroyed if Jogan didn't activate for Boruto back then. Then it went dormant because there was nothing for the Jogan to do at that point because like the world wasn't in imminent danger anymore. So it essentially went back into hiding. Then during the Momoshiki fight, it saw Momoshiki as a big enough threat then to manifest to help Boruto get the edge on him. And then when you notice, you see Momoshiki when he notices the Jogan. Not only does he look infuriated, but he looks terrified at the same time because he knows what the Jogan has the potential to do. It has the potential to ruin all of his plans that he has for Boruto. So when he sees it, he's angry and he's terrified as to what can happen next. And then the last time we've really seen Jougan is back in the desert when they were fighting with Gaara, and I forget that guy's name. Kinshiki? I think it was Kinshiki. That was like the last main time that we saw Jougan was when he was trying to like track him through like the portals with his chakra nature. Actually, no. The last time we ever really saw Jougan was at the end of part one for the anime when essentially Boruto and Kawaki are declaring that this is their story. So that harkens back to the point that Jougan activates when there can be major diverges in the story. So like for example, Kawaki thinks it's his story, it's actually Boruto's story. These have the potential to converge and diverge and make their own timelines. Like the Jougan is essentially some a weapon that can be used to combat these diverging timelines. That's essentially what the Jougan is now. Now, how does this all circle back to Momoshiki and how it can prevent Momoshiki from manifesting? Well, as we know, or as we now have been talking about, the Jougan is something that essentially is sentient and activates when it knows it needs to protect Boruto. Well, if Momoshiki is essentially trying to do a body snatch of Boruto and essentially take over him and exploit his eye that has the scar, that's when the Jougan could activate, push him back. And that's when the Jougan is essentially ever present throughout the rest of the narrative. It's going to be used now as not only a way to keep Momoshiki at bay, but it's also going to be used to essentially be what Boruto needs to combat everything. Because now that he can't use karma because he's afraid of dying and Momoshiki taking over, this is when the Jougan can come back into the story. Because the Jougan realizes that it's needed in order to essentially fix everything, protect Boruto, and essentially save the world. That's the whole point of the Jougan. The Jougan is essentially the last line of defense for Earth. That's essentially what the Jougan is at this point. That's why we don't see it too often, because it can only be used at certain points. Because the Jougan is something that is sentient enough that it only wants to activate for big, like earth shattering, like moments in the story. That's why we only saw it really in Niue. That's why it was present for so long in the Niue arc, because like that was a earth shattering moment in the story where Nue could just destroy the village. And if the village is destroyed, like that's it. That's it for the story essentially. So the Jougan had to intervene back then. Like that's the whole, and then like especially like in the village hidden in the mist, like that was also a point where the story had the potential to diverge because if Boruto died there, then like if Boruto died there, then the story ends. Like when he was still in the academy. That's why you could see it flicker for a second because it wanted to take over, but then it realized, oh no, Boruto has this under control. I don't need to intervene, and that's why it went dormant again. The Jougan is something that will remain dormant until it knows that like it's needed again in order to save the world. That's essentially why we barely see this power up. We barely see it because it's only activated for moments that have the potential to change the course of history in Boruto. So like anything now that can create a diverging timeline, I can personally see that's how the Jougan can get reactivated. And now that Momoshiki potentially has a window to take over and essentially cause the death of Boruto, that is going to be the impetus that the Jougan needs to essentially remain as a constant like power up throughout the rest of the series. Do I think this could happen? I think it can. This has the potential to be crazy in the story if they actually do it. If they actually go this way, I would be floored because the Jougan is something that I think is such a cool thing that they introduced in the story, but they don't use it enough. And the reason why they probably haven't used it is because it's saved for key moments in the story. And I think now coming up, in order to protect Boruto from Momoshiki, this could be a key moment in the story where like the Jougan could come back. Like that's probably why his scar looks different now, and that's why it looks like it's morphing because it's morphing to essentially look like the Jougan. That would be so cool if that's what they're foreshadowing with just that V jump cover. That would be amazing. I would love that. But who knows what they're gonna do? I hope they do something like this, but you never know. I've been wrong before, but hopefully this time I'm right. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think that this could be how the Jougan is reintroduced back into the Boruto manga? Like, or actually just shown in the Boruto manga for the first time. It's basically just been an anime original thing up until this point. But do you think this is how the Boruto manga could introduce the Jougan into the story? Or do you think this is just like a piece of art for V Jump and it's nothing too crazy? Let me know what you guys think. Like, comment, subscribe, and as always, I'm going to talk to you guys next time. Bye.